as well as on Zoom. So I'm going to just go over this shortly and briefly. We're broadcasting this meeting on Pacific Coast TV's and website. You can, just for etiquette purposes, in Zoom and in person, we will start with community public announcement in person first and then move on to Zoom. General public comment will start, and then community members can speak on specific items when the specific agenda is listed and spoken on with the members. Those wanting to speak will recognize you raising your icon hand on Zoom, and you can come up to the diocese to speak in person. I don't think we've had any correspondence on any of our projects this evening. I haven't sent anything most recent, but I'm sure that our planners will announce that.
Yes, absolutely. At least on the 8 Gentle Lane, we did have a few emails and a memorandum that was distributed.
Okay, so we've distributed it to the commission this evening. I will hand over the meeting to our acting chair, Vice Chair Gossett, to start the meeting, and then we'll go over the telecom process after we get the meeting open.
Okay, I would like to open the Planning Commission meeting for May 23rd. Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to open the meeting for the Planning Commission on May 23rd, 2023. Can everyone stand for a Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, so Bridget, can you take roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Reddick,
I am here.
Commissioner Jonas,
Here.
Commissioner Gorn,
Here.
Vice Chair and Acting Gossett,
Here.
and Chair Hernandez, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. I'll just want to make note that Chair Hernandez is off-site this evening, so we do have all of our commissioners present, and he's just on via Zoom, so we'll just take roll call votes and so forth.
Thank you. Okay, so I would like to ask if anyone has any comments about the draft minutes from our 4/25/2023 meeting. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I move we approve those minutes.
Second.
I second.
Okay.
Roll call will be Commissioner Reddick,
Yes.
Commissioner Jonas,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn,
Yes, please.
Acting Chair Gossett,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Motion approved. I'm going to go ahead and read the teleconferencing scripts for Commissioner Hernandez. We've done roll call, so done that. So Commissioner Hernandez is participating by speakerphone in accordance with the Brown Act and teleconferencing location that's been identified on the notice and the agenda for this meeting. I'd now like to ask him a few questions. Commissioner Hernandez, can you hear me well?
I can.
Are you able to hear the proceedings up until this moment?
I can.
You have posted the agenda and the location where you are in North Carolina?
I have, and I have submitted photographic proof of the posting.
He has. Is your location reasonably accessible to the public and they're able to participate if they wish?
It is. I am in the Residence Inn in the Uptown Charlotte Hotel with Marriott. So if anybody wants to join me, I am sadly alone right now, but happy to receive visitors.
Okay, so you answered the next question, that if you have any other people that would like to speak that's there, please allow them to.
There is nobody here that I can see other than the attendants working at the desk.
So I'd like to ask the commission that's here presently if you can see, if you can hear Commissioner Hernandez clearly. Okay. And hearing that there's no other issues, he can hear you, we can hear us, I think we're good. So we just want to make sure that we will take roll call for each item that's required tonight, but that's it. Go ahead.
Thank you. At this time, we are going to open up public comment. If anyone would like to speak on any item that is not on the agenda, now is the time.
I do not see anyone on the Zoom nor present here.
Okay, we will close public comment and then move on to the next item of business. The project description is notification of the director's intent to approve a temporary use in the PUD zoning district, the location of 2 Miramontes Point Road. And I believe, Scott, are you going to present?
Thank you, Commissioner
Thank you.
Gossett and members of the Planning Commission. It's true, it does mention my name on the agenda, but it was actually Ocoee Wilson at the city that's been
Okay.
handling this item this year. And we thought some of you may not have had a chance to meet Ocoee. She's been with us since July and logged in to a couple of virtual meetings, but we thought this would be a great opportunity for the commission to finally meet Ocoee in person. So with that, Ocoee, maybe you can give us a few words on the temporary use permit for Ocean Colony Partners. And we're happy to have Ocoee here with us, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for the introduction, and good evening, Honorable Chair and Planning Commissioners. This is a notification for the director's intent to approve a temporary use permit. The temporary use permit is for a large tent at the old course at Half Moon Bay Golf Links. It includes 2 smaller ancillary tents as well. The temporary use is no more than 90 days. It's from the end of July until around the end of October. This is consistent with a temporary use permit that the director has approved annually since 2006. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Through the chair,
Yes.
this has become a rather procedural thing we've done over the years. And I've participated in many votes on this project. And I don't have clarifying questions, but I am supportive of the measure and would, as I have done in the past, continue to suggest that this is something that could be delegated to the authority of the planning director, as opposed to something that has to come to the planning commission for approval, as it adds great cost to the applicant every time they have to do this.
Thank you, Chair Hernandez. Does anyone else have comments? Commissioner Ruddick?
Well, as Chair Hernandez points out, I'm not sure about every year during the pandemic, but almost every year that I've been on the commission, we've gone through this. And Director Ickes at 1 or maybe 2 points explained to us why it was necessary. But yeah, it would be a relief to everyone, I think, if we could simplify the procedure around it. It seems like it puts staff and potentially the applicant through more toil and trouble than is really appropriate, given the good cause that this charity auction and the tents involved serve.
Thank you.
But I meant to conclude that, of course, I will support it again this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ruddick. Commissioner Joannis?
Yes, I just have a question as far as the costs associated with for the applicant. How much does it cost the applicant, and how much of that goes towards the fees associated for staff to process it, and how much does it support our general fund?
Acting Chair, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to answer that.
Please, thank
or
you.
At least give some general information. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's, the fee that's listed in our adopted fee schedule for use permit, and I believe it's somewhere around $1,100 that the applicant submits. And then we also issue a coastal development permit exemption for that. And that's strictly to cover staff time. And no, there's no general funds out of the general fund that go towards this.
I have a follow-up question.
Oh.
So the staff time involved would still be involved to review this, except it would be coming to the Planning Commission. So there's no difference in cost associated with this at all, because it still is staff time reviewing the permit every year. It still has to come through, correct?
Correct. As it's written in our code currently, within the PUD chapter of our zoning code, there are specific provisions for temporary use, and we did explore the option of doing maybe a 5-year sort of programmatic temporary use permit for our applicant, but the conclusion was that would require a code amendment. So perhaps, when we get into a comprehensive update to our zoning code, that would probably be the appropriate time to explore some changes to our temporary use requirements.
Any other clarifying questions? I don't believe we need to take action on this. I think is that correct? You're not asking us to vote.
I believe that's correct. I think this is just a notification that the director intends to approve it, but the zoning code does require that we notify the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Our next item is Item 1A, the project description is an application for coastal development permit, a height variance, and architectural review to allow the construction of a new 2-story, single-family residence, detached ADU, and site improvements. The city file is PDP number 21-062, and the location is at 8 Jenna Lane.
Thank you, Acting Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I am actually the project planner on this one, so I'll go ahead and give a brief presentation. But before I start, I wanted to give the Commission a reminder that you're encouraged to disclose any ex parte communication with the applicant or owner before the presentation.
Is now the time to do that?
That would be this would be the appropriate time to do that. And then afterwards, Jill would like to give a few words on, some correspondence that we received that were transmitted to you this afternoon through a memorandum.
Thank you, Scott. So does anyone want to start with ex parte communications? I see Rick Hernandez, Commissioner Chair Hernandez has his hand raised.
Go ahead.
Through the acting chair, I have had ex parte communications with the applicant's architect on this project. I have received no material information about the project, but I've had 3 communications with the applicant that I have conveyed to city staff. I've also communicated with the Fair Political Practices Commission my communications, and they have responded to me with a letter indicating that I have no clear conflict of interest from a financial perspective on this project, and happy to share additional feedback after the fact. But I also say there was a email we received from an anonymous, non-interested party who expressed concern about my participation in this project. It's my observation that I'm participating objectively and fairly on the project as a whole, and I have done nothing inappropriate in my participation in this project. In fact, I've upheld city code by making the planning process more transparent and approachable by members of the public and their applicants.
Thank you, Chair Hernandez.
I'd like to also say that I've had ex parte communications. I also advise city staff. I've also advised city staff of my meeting with the applicant at the public open house on May 23rd, where I learned several things about the project, including the height and the variance, and also at that point in time, a little bit about the other possible plans that were looked at. Also on May 1st, I think, I was walking back along Jenna Lane from the market, supermarket, and I ran into Ms. Boyer, and we had a lovely conversation about lots of different things, including native plants, which is something that I've learned to love since I've met her. And, you know, she also mentioned to me several things about the project that, you know, this project has been going on for several years, I think, and there was a first initial design that was looked at that had a clustered type of a design, and it went through the Architectural Review Committee at the time, but then was subsequently changed, and that this particular design has come forward since then, and that there might also be other plans that they might consider as well. So I brought that to the city's attention. And Ms. Boyer also asked several questions that I didn't know the answers to, so I had referred them back to the city staff. So that's what I'd like to report.
I would also like to disclose ex parte communication. I did attend the open house on Saturday, April 22nd, and that's where I met Susan Boyer, the applicant, and the architect, and I happened to run into Hazel, Commissioner Joannes, by coincidence. And we talked about the plan itself and other plans that did not require a variance, although we did not talk about those plans specifically, but they were mentioned in our discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, commissioners. It sounds like we've got 3 of you who've had ex parte, no more. That's great. I'm going to turn it over to our attorney, Winter King, for just a moment, who will review ex parte just for the good of the group.
Thank you. And through the acting chair, I thought since 3 of you had questions about ex parte communications, I would just go over the rules. I'm hearing a little echo, I don't know. About ex parte communications in Half Moon Bay. And first I wanted to say that he's muted. Okay, great, thank you. So there is no prohibition on having ex parte communications, which are generally communications or other sort of site visits and activities by which planning commissioners might gain information outside of the public meeting forum. However, when you do have those experiences and communications, there is a provision of the Planning Commission bylaws that requires you to disclose, as you did tonight, to the public all the communications, and that includes, you know, emails, conversations, and site visits that occurred outside of the hearing. beyond the Planning Commission bylaws and Half Moon Bay Code, there are sort of general, what we call common law conflicts of interest rules, which basically provide that in projects like this, for approvals like this, where the Planning Commission is taking Half Moon Bay's code and applying it to a particular application, they're called quasi-judicial decisions, that the applicant is entitled to a fair and unbiased hearing. And so typically, when there's a disclosure of ex parte communication, if there is any question or doubt, the commissioner may, as I believe Chair Hernandez stated, just disclose whether or not that communication made it impossible for him or her to approach the project with an open mind. So basically, as long as the planning commissioners can provide a fair and unbiased hearing, there is no problem with those external communications. So hope that clarifies the process.
All right, thank you very much, Winter. Also, Jill Ekus, your Community Development Director, I do want to acknowledge a communication that you received today. It related to an email that we had received back in April regarding this item. Chair Hernandez actually already made mention of it. I didn't include it in the packet for this item coming forward, and I know we received a question about that today. For a few reasons. First of all, it wasn't sent to staff as anything of a project comment. It was addressed to the city attorney. I only saw it because the city attorney shared it with me, and it had to do with concern about conflict of interest, and we immediately worked with the commissioner who was the subject of this and handled the matter appropriately. And so I sincerely did not think of it as being a project comment. We have now given this to you. It concerned us a little bit more just because it included a profanity and it was not signed by anyone. And so it was just a really unusual communication, and I'm sorry if you missed out on that, although I think all of you received it earlier. So that's what happened, and it was my choice and nothing more than that, and it is now posted on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Through the chair.
Oh, yes, Rick?
I just wanted to comment that the alarming concerns that were raised in the email, I don't really find any merit in them. And while I know the applicant and the applicant's representative, the architect, that's not somebody who I've really spent a lot of time socializing with. However, I've had 3 ex parte communications on this project. And I just wanted to mention that as somebody who is representing their client, I see nothing inappropriate in the behavior that Mr. Grunow has done on behalf of his client. And in fact, it's consistent with everything I've ever seen, where somebody who is diligent and working hard to make sure the questions are being asked, they're doing everything they can to do that's appropriate in reaching out to members of city staff. And also, with respect to procedural things that were raised around a variance, I had no opinion on any of that stuff. And I directed the applicant and the applicant's representative to work with city staff to address that. So I just wanted to be clear that I don't know how to figure out how to get around a variance. It's not my thing. I look at projects. And when the applicant has a question, city staff are the ones who have to deal with the technical issues, not me.
Thank you for that, Chair Hernandez. I think, Scott, are you ready to make a presentation?
Yes,
Are we at that
I
point
can, Chair.
now?
I'll go ahead and get going on the presentation. And the slide that you see now is sort of an aerial photograph overview of the site itself, 8 Jenna Lane. And it's sort of mid-block up Jenna Lane on the west side of the road, and is zoned planned unit development. And it's, this planned unit development is subject to the Matucci specific plan, which allows for single-family residential land use. So the subject property is Lot 8A within the Matucci subdivision and is 30,000 square feet in area. So a little sort of overview of the project description. It includes a two-story single-family residence of 3,783 square feet, and then a detached accessory dwelling unit of around 700 square feet. And both new buildings will include separate two-car garages, which are, on the side, sort of side-loaded garages. Now, the current application was submitted back in August of 2021, and the initial design, I think it was mentioned earlier, was presented to our Architectural Advisory Committee, and the AAC had substantial comments on the design. I worked with the landowner, and we kind of explored other things. She was able to come up with a comprehensive redesign. And shortly after submitting the redesign, we presented the project again to our Architectural Advisory Committee. This time around, the AAC, they were fully supportive of the revised design, and that's when we went into scheduling the Planning Commission meeting that was noticed last month. Now, the permits requested include a coastal development permit, architectural review, and then also a variance for excess height as stated in the Matucci Neighborhood Agreement, which I'll go into detail a little bit later in the presentation. Now, this slide shows, is a site plan that was included in the plan set, and you'll see that there are two distinct buildings associated with the project. You can notice the side-loaded garages there that sort of go onto the driveway along the south side of the property. And then also a comprehensive landscape plan was included that include a variety of drought-tolerant native plants. As you know, the landowner is very passionate about plants and cultivating native plants and volunteering in the community with native plants. The driveway itself would be gravel, pervious, along the south side, providing access to the two garages. And that's shown in the landscape plan. And then this slide shows the the floor plans for the main house. The first floor plan is on the left. The second floor plan is on the right. And sort of some unique stairways that allow for access and lots of corners, dynamic building as far as design goes. Roof plan, you'll notice that there is a roof deck associated with the roof plan with the roof access along, noted in blue there. It's a stairway that extends up that allows access to the roof deck. ADU is a very simple floor plan, single story. The roof plan is on the left, floor plan on the right. Again, the two-car garage that provides parking for the ADU. ADU still has articulation along the side facing Jenna Lane with some overhangs. Now, this is the east elevation that would face Jenna Lane. The main, as I mentioned earlier, the main house has a tower element that's seen on the left that provides access to the roof deck through, covered stairway. And note that the ADU, it would be in front of this. South elevation showing the main entrance and the garage entrances. And then the west elevation facing the ocean, you'll notice that there's a second-story patio area that captures the views to the west. And then the north elevation, you'll notice that the large rainwater storage barrel, there are 2 of them that are included with this project, and that was one of the items that the applicant selected on the Measure D checklist. And then ADU elevations, the elevation on the left is the east elevation that would face Jenna Lane, and then the garage is facing south. Opposite the ADU elevation on the west and then north, you'll notice that the other rain barrel is tucked right next to the ADU. And then artistic oblique angle of the proposal, you get a better feel of what the new buildings would look like on the site, as well as the gravel driveway. Facing Jenna, this is the rendering certainly gives a better sense of the look and feel of the proposal, getting a sense of the articulation that's included in both the front of the ADU as well as the main house, and sort of the continuity between the 2 buildings. Now, here's the elevation facing west and the farmland, the ocean beyond. The picture on the right is a photograph I took when my family and I we took a trip to Sea Ranch, and I thought I would pop this in here because I noticed some similarities with the building on the right compared to what's being proposed here. Again, you'll notice the large rainwater storage tank. The idea is that storing all the rainwater on site will reduce the need for irrigation. So the landowner is very passionate about storing rainwater. Now this slide gives a summary of the items that I'm going to go over next as far as the analysis of this proposal. Metucci specific plan, as I mentioned earlier, the proposed improvements conform to the Metucci specific plan development standards, including lot coverage, setbacks, height. All of the development standards are complied by the proposal. What's worth mentioning, though, the Metucci neighborhood agreement, which was agreed upon in 2001 by several property owners in the vicinity as well as the developer at the time. And the agreement primarily relates to height limits and landscaping that are not covered in the adopted specific plan development standards. Now, 20 years later, when we adopted our new local coastal land use plan, we included a policy 2.44 that references the neighborhood agreement in relation to height and landscaping. And by doing so, this policy allowed the specific provisions of the agreement to be enforceable by the city. So before that time, we had several houses that were developed. They were not subject to the Metucci neighborhood agreement. But since we have the policy in our land use plan now, the neighborhood agreement provisions related to height and landscaping are enforceable for new development moving forward. Now, the Metucci neighborhood agreement includes a height limit of 22 feet. The proposed house contains the enclosed stairway element that I mentioned earlier that extends 4 feet 10 inches beyond the 22 feet. The building extension is, like I said, to allow access to the roof deck. And on this slide, I tried to indicate the portion that extends beyond the 22 feet in the red box there. And, you know, although the house meets the requirements of the Metucci specific plan, it exceeds the height limit of the Metucci neighborhood agreement, which requires a height variance. And our code actually has provisions to allow for height variances in planned unit developments. Now take note that you know, before our adopted land use plan, we had 4 houses that were developed that exceed the 22-foot height limit within the Metucci planned unit development. So in order for the commission to allow the enclosed stairway as designed, a variance for increased building height is required. And staff has prepared the findings for the height variance, section 1823010. We also prepared the findings for basically any other variance that the Planning Commission typically reviews. But those are not required for granting the height exception in a planned unit development. So both sets of findings are included with the draft resolution, but only the findings associated with 010 are needed to grant the variance, the height variance. Now a little bit about the visual resource area and scenic corridor standards. The site is actually, you know, partially visible from the town boulevard as defined in Chapter 9 of our land use plan, with a slot view of the ocean across the southern portion of the site. And early on in the, you know, after the application was submitted, I met with the owner and we discussed this. And they designed around it. They said, okay, well, we're going to put the driveway on the south side to preserve this public view of the ocean across the site. So it was, you know, it was a very collaborative process to come up with this design. And, you know, the Architectural Advisory Committee, they were supportive of the design, and, you know, the summary notes are included with your staff report. You know, the AAC, they found that the house and the ADU design would not impact the protected visual resources related to the town boulevard. Now, this proposal, being that it's a single-family residence, is also subject to our single-family residential design guidelines. And the AAC also found that the proposal was in substantial conformance with our design guidelines. You know, several of the design guidelines can be identified as related to the design of the new house. One I've mentioned earlier, the side-loaded garages. The garages will barely be visible from Jenna Lane, which is a nice touch. The AAC, they did have a few minor suggestions, you know, that the applicant, you know, the design team and the owner have certainly taken into consideration. Window size increase, you know, there was more of a suggestion really from the AAC to capture some of the beautiful views from to the west. They suggested more landscaping, which I think the owner is certainly willing to do and intends to, honestly. I think over time she'll plant more as time goes on. And they also gave the suggestion of adding more irrigation. And I think the owner's intent is to maybe even add more rainwater storage as time goes on to compensate for the lack of irrigation. Now, leading up to this meeting, we did have a couple of questions about story poles. Story poles were installed in plenty of time before the meeting in April. The landowner did receive a letter from the fire district requesting that weed abatement take place before last week. And she had it all scheduled, but the the landscapers, they were not able to do the weed abatement with the story poles in place. The owner met with city staff. We met with the director, and we thought that was reasonable for them to remove the story poles after photographs had been taken. We did include some of the photographs in attached to the staff report. And then here's another slide with the story poles. And I believe that, I believe all the commissioners were able to make it out to the site to view the story poles. Now, a little bit on Measure D. There were 2 Measure D allocations granted for this project. Initially, the applicant did select the 35 points associated with affordable housing. The question came up whether or not that was necessary. She was, kind of thinking that, she wanted to explore other things. We pulled up the scoring from 2021 to see if it would have made a difference, the additional 35 points, and she still would have gotten the 2 allocations for Measure D. So we thought it was appropriate that, if she's not willing to, not interested in moving forward with the affordable housing requirement, then that's okay. That seems reasonable. Now, a little bit about as far as CEQA, the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA, which is normal for a single-family house that's outside of sensitive habitat or doesn't impact any other environmental resources. There was an initial study, mitigated negative declaration, adopted with the subdivision back in 1999. The ISMND back then primarily had mitigation measures associated with the lots next to the creek. This is far removed from Pillarcitos Creek and aren't necessarily applicable to this site. So we feel that a categorical exemption is appropriate. And just to sort of summarize the noticing that it's taken place, we posted the site back in 2021, right when the application was submitted, just to give the neighbors the heads up that this was coming forward. We also did a courtesy notice for the initial Architectural Advisory Committee meeting. We mailed out notices to all the neighbors and property owners within 300 feet for the meeting in April. And then we also posted a legal notice in the newspaper. We've transmitted all the correspondence that we've received to the commission and some responses to the correspondence that was received. And we recommend approval of the project, and note that there is a 10 working day appeal period, that any decision by the Planning Commission could be appealed to our city council, and then an additional 10 working day appeal period that any final decision of the city could be appealed to the California Coastal Commission. Now, the next couple of slides, I did sort of summarize essentially all the decisions that the Planning Commission could make on this. You certainly have some options. For example, you could adopt the draft resolution that was included with the staff report with added or modified conditions of approval. That's certainly an option. You could continue the item to a date certain, which would not require renoticing of this project, or a date uncertain to give the applicant more time to address any concerns. Similar to what took place in April, you continued it to a date certain of tonight. Or you could direct staff to return to the Planning Commission with a resolution for denial. And then a little bit about format. I think the applicant does have a couple of, would like to give a few words, especially on the design process that took place with the new house and ADU. And both the applicant and staff would be happy to, provide any answers to clarifying questions, and then Planning Commission deliberation and action. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. At this time, I would invite the applicant, if you wish to come forward, to provide additional information before we go into public comment.
Hi. Hello, hear me? I'm Susan Boyer. I'm the owner of the 8 Jenna Lane, and I'm going to read my notes because I'm a terrible public speaker. I'm a third-generation Californian and grew up in the Bay Area. I've been coming to Half Moon Bay for over 70 years, but didn't move here until 2009. I knew immediately that I never wanted to live anywhere else. When we first moved here, I would walk down Jenna Lane and see the for sale sign in front of the property. I walked by it for a year, and one day I thought, if this property sells, I'm going to be heartbroken. So I got together with my father and brother and came up with the money to purchase it. That was 2010. Since that time, I've spent countless hours dreaming about my forever home and beautifying the site with native plants. I've always been a gardener, but became a huge native plant enthusiast when I connected with the volunteer nursery at the state park just down the street. We do amazing work growing native plants and restoring them all along our coast from Montara Beach to Año Nuevo. I've been able to use what I've learned to plant on the property long before I had any concrete house plans. You may have seen the crazy lady pulling 2 acres worth of weeds by hand. Yes, it is an impossible task, but it is therapeutic, good exercise, and has given me the opportunity to meet many of the neighbors. I've had lots of compliments about the native garden I've planted along the sidewalk, and have been able to share plants, flowers, and advice with the neighbors. It is my happy place. The house design reflects several of my passions: family, sustainability, and native plants. I want it to be an example of what is possible. Among other things, I plan to use locally sourced materials whenever possible, like redwood for siding. The house will be all electric with solar panels. There will be tanks for rainwater catchment, which will be used for flushing toilets and doing laundry, and of course, landscaping. This is a larger house than I would have chosen, but it needs to be in order to be compatible with neighboring homes. That being said, it's going to be one of the smaller homes on Jenna Lane. By making the house 2 stories, we maximize the open space and increase the efficiency of the build. I will be sharing the house with my son and grandsons. We've added an ADU so that another family can share the site with us. It would be sad, even for me, to see this beautiful piece of property torn up by construction, but I believe it will be worth it in the end. I think we've designed 2 amazing homes that will fit well in the Half Moon Bay environment. I will do everything I can to keep it beautiful for the neighborhood and welcoming for all our wonderful native plants and animals. I hope you like the design and appreciate the intention and thought that went into it.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the public comment or public hearing.
Looks like we have no one at the kiosk here, and there's no one in attendees.
Oh, someone did raise their hand.
It's acting, or
it's-
Chair Hernandez, and we'll get there.
Okay. All right, well, then we will close the public hearing
Yeah, there's
on this item and open this up to clarifying questions. Commissioner Hernandez, Chair Hernandez, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Acting Chair Gossett. I read through the comments by the neighbor one Sandra Klein, and I saw an evolving set of correspondence. And the person who made those comments is not here tonight. And so I'd like to ask city staff their opinion on those comments and whether or not the applicant has addressed the feedback provided by one Ms. Klein.
Did he not get the memorandum?
Maybe I missed it, sorry.
Yes, Acting Chair, I'd be
Check
happy
the email.
to clarify on
Go-
the correspondence
thank you.
received. We did receive an email, I believe it was yesterday, from Ms. Klein, the landowner to the south, and she rescinded all concerns that she previously had, except for some concerns with, how the sewer line, the lateral was going to be handled. And I did talk to Ms. Klein just to reassure her that engineering staff has already started looking at, sewer lateral sizing and, locations, and that this is going to be gone over with a fine-tooth comb as far as civil engineering plans, and, it's absolutely going to be done right as far as sewer access. And she did seem okay with that, and she didn't have any other concerns. Now, I also talked to the architect, and he said that they had some, communication about some fencing, and that they were working things out as far as good neighbor fencing, and that things seem pretty amicable.
And so the wastewater concerns, I see the letter, and sorry for not communicating clearly, but I see the letter. The wastewater concerns have been addressed from a city staff perspective, and any other issues that have been raised by this one neighbor, you feel, regardless of whether or not this project is approved, would be addressed with city staff and normal planning and development process that you guys would have purview over.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ruddick?
Thank you. And thank you, Scott, for this comprehensive and thoughtful packet. To clarify, I apologize for not having memorized the resolution, but is the condition about affordable housing removed from the current draft of the resolution? Commissioner Gorn has memorized it and is saying yes.
Yes, that's correct. So that the condition related to the affordable housing requirement per the applicant's request has been removed. And like I mentioned earlier, the Measure D allocations, absent of the affordable housing 35 points, would have still been issued.
Yeah, I understand that. That seems logical. Thank you.
Commissioner Joannis, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I have actually several. To prepare for this item, I researched a lot of what was discussed on prior meetings held for properties on Jenna Lane. I think it was 11, is it 11 Jenna Lane? That's way, let's see, lot, I don't know what the lot is. The items that were discussed in 2016 and 2017,
That was 32 Jenna Lane.
right? But they talked about the agreement, the neighborhood agreement, right? And there was a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission at that time about the height variance, and a lot of questions about the landscaping. And how many more lots are left open that can be developed that would, if we're asked to have a height variance, would that be possible for those lots? And then would this set precedence if we were granting one way or the other?
Yeah, Acting Chair, I'd be happy to answer that question. It's, so this is the last vacant lot in the Matucci planned unit development. 32 Jenna was the property that was where a coastal development permit was approved. I believe it was back in 2017. And that site actually contains a small house currently. And the proposal back then was to convert the existing small house to an accessory dwelling unit and build a larger house. The approvals that were issued back then all expired, but conceivably a new house could get approved there in the future, which would be subject to the Matucci neighborhood agreement. The 32 Jenna, the approvals that were issued years ago, were not subject to the neighborhood agreement because that was before our new land use plan. So besides this lot, it would be redevelopment of lots. For example, if a new owner decided to demolish an existing house and maybe build something larger or something in the future, the new house would probably be subject to the neighborhood agreement. So.
I have additional questions.
Go
if
ahead.
That's okay.
All right.
And I know this question might not need to be answered, but I wanted to understand better, the clustering of the houses that were first identified originally in the, for this lot. I understand that the Architectural Review Committee didn't like that for several reasons, although I'm seeing in a housing element that we're wanting clustering again. So, it's sad to see that clustering wasn't liked before, but now is something that we're looking at. So I'm not really sure, but I just wanted to make that comment because if there are other houses that come this way in that manner, it's clustering. I'm hoping that our Architectural Review Committee actually looks very consistently across the board for these kinds of, projects. How many height variances for residential houses has the city approved in the past? Do we have an idea of how many we've actually approved in the past, let's say 5 years?
For Jenna?
Not for Jenna, for just the city in general.
So I'm remembering back to 2013 when I first started working at the city. It was before we maybe in 2015 we had a comprehensive update to our the residential chapter of our zoning code. The previous version limited the height of single story to 20 feet. So if you were to, if you wanted to build a single story, single family residence in a residential zoning district, a height variance would be needed for a house over 20 feet. And I can remember that there were quite a few that were granted back then. For example, if someone wanted a 22-foot height, vaulted ceiling or something of that nature. So I do recall several height variances granted back then. After the update, not very many, so.
And one other question. Were there any other plans that the city looked at for this particular property? Or were they introduced by the applicant at all?
No, just the initial submittal and then one resubmittal. So that was it. We had a few just minor sort of note changes on the plans
That's my screen again.
that took place, and that was about it. So only 2 designs with this project.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I would like to add on a little bit to Scott's answer about the previous submittals. I was just trying to show you the original submittal. And I was having some trouble getting the connection to work, but maybe Scott, maybe you can find it. I'll try again though. I think it would be helpful for you to see it. I'm not sure that it really meets the definition of what I would call clustering at all. I think it's quite laid out. It does create a courtyard, so maybe that is the concept that was being thought about. I will note that in the local coastal land use plan, clustering is acknowledged as a potential good approach to site planning in planned unit developments in other areas, but not necessarily the only way to go about it. So it's trying to be really a little bit more open-minded about different sites. So for example, this site, there's actually a view corridor that covers a portion of the site. I think it's the south side of the site that really makes the architect have to push the development to the north and arrange it in that format towards the north, and limits putting anything on the southern portion of the site. So that's an example of a site that has a constraint and needed a responsive design solution to it. But I do want to, if we could show this to you, I think you might feel a little more assured about what was on the table before. Scott, I'll give it one more go so you can keep focused on your item.
Actually, I'm pulling up the plans that were originally submitted
perfect.
right now.
Thank you.
It should work. Let's see here. Connecting. Okay, so the plans that I have on screen right now are the original plans that were included with the original submittal. You'll see that it's, it's somewhat similar, two buildings, but as I remember, the main concern that the Architectural Advisory Committee had was that, the design wasn't fully compatible with the other houses along Jenna Lane, and that it had more of a sort of a commercial feel, maybe almost like maybe a hotel or something of that nature.
Okay, Commissioner Gorn?
Just really quickly, I didn't see this in the staff report. So I know that there was an approval for a house here before, and that approved by both Planning Commission and City Council. How big was that? It just says single story, but it doesn't say how big a house that was approved before. Do you have an answer to that one?
No, I don't. All the approvals did expire, so I didn't dive too deep, and I wasn't able to find a set of the approved plans. But that said, I think I wouldn't be surprised if the staff report notes the size of the houses. As I remember, they were maybe slightly larger than this.
I mean, we are talking about this one, so it's not that big a deal. I was just curious.
Okay, so the architect just handed me a flyer that maybe I'll hand to the acting chair to circulate.
Okay.
Looks like it was city approved 3,800 square feet. So.
Okay. Thank you.
So much smaller. Is that right?
I would like to follow up on a question that Chair Hernandez had asked about with the with the neighbor to the south, who rescinded all their objections. The one question I have, and maybe Scott, you can answer this, is they were worried about their views being obstructed due to the nature of the positioning of the home on the lot. And how was that resolved?
So, I may pull the architect in that he did have some direct, how I understand it is that he communicated with the neighbor to the south. I did sort of give her as nice as I possibly could, just to explain, hey, we don't necessarily have any policies or ordinances that protect private views. We do have protection of public views. So I did mention that to her, like I said, as nicely as I could, so.
I mean, I'm just curious if there's a way that they both could have views.
Yeah, Acting Chair, I would suggest maybe giving the architect an opportunity to elaborate on that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Stuart Gruneau, architect. We did have ongoing conversations with Ms. Klein, and we offered many solutions in order to resolve the situation. We offered to move the entire building complex to the north 5 feet, which we still would actually like to do. That would improve her views. But at the end of the day, she chose to have Susan build a fence. So Susan is paying for a fence that I guess would block her view, but that's what she wants.
Thank you. I have additional questions, but I don't know if my fellow commissioners have questions they would like to continue with. Go ahead, Commissioner. Oh, I could, okay. I wanted to ask about the landscaping. I noticed the landscaping in the front was absolutely gorgeous with all the native plants in front of the house. So I imagine that this is going to be stunning. But there were a few trees that are not yet 7 feet, but that will probably grow taller than 7 feet. And I was wondering how they would, that restriction of having trees not exceed 7 feet, how that would be enforced. That's one question. And actually, and then the other, well, I guess it's more of a discussion item that I'll talk about later, but that's basically it. Just, I noticed some trees that can grow taller than 7 feet. That was a question.
Yes, so, kind of tying into what I mentioned earlier about the Matucci neighborhood agreement, the 7-foot height limit would be enforceable by the city for this project and any future project in the Matucci planned unit development. So, ultimately it would be code enforcement that would take action if we receive a complaint or, and through contacting the property owner.
So the code, so the code will require, ensures that this can be enforced, because I didn't see it in the exhibit for the condition of approval for landscaping maintenance. So I didn't see any reference to the Matucci agreement.
I may want to double check with Jill and Winter, but I don't see why we couldn't add a condition of approval. So
We're looking at that now, Scott.
Okay.
That's a very appropriate place to put it. We'll get back to you.
Commissioner
Yeah, in
Joannis?
following up with that, so the agreement and the code for the landscaping would only apply to this particular lot. Is that correct?
That's correct, in any future development that takes place in Matucci that requires
So that would be
permits.
the
So,
32 Jenna Lane then?
yes, for
potentially.
example, if the landowner there decided to build a larger house, so similar to what was approved in the past. So
And there's nothing that can be done about the trees that are growing now that are well over 7 feet?
that's my understanding, yes.
Does anyone else have questions? Chair
I don't have any
Hernandez?
clarifying questions, but if we want to move to discussion, I'd like to raise an issue.
Please do.
So I haven't gone through the Measure D process, but I've built a single-family house and gone through the Measure A process, which is very similar. And I've observed personally, and as a planning commissioner, that there's a certain amount of gamesmanship that happens when one applies for either a Measure A or a Measure D. And while I think this project visually is stunning, from a design guidelines perspective, I have no issues. I think it's protected public coastal views. So the things I'm super passionate about, it's ticked the boxes. The thing I'm concerned about, even though staff don't seem to be so concerned about, is ex facto or post facto changing the criteria that you originally applied for the Measure D with. And I remember this project having the deed restriction on the accessory dwelling unit because it was kind of novel at the time. So after the fact, they figured out, hey, I got my approval and it wouldn't have changed the scoring after the fact. I'm a little concerned about letting applicants change their projects, the material, big rocks on a project after they submitted it, once they find the results. I think it encourages the wrong behavior. And it's not a hill I'm necessarily going to die on this project, but procedurally, it just strikes me as a little odd. And I get it that once you've applied for the project and you've gotten approval, your opinion may have changed, but these are the conditions under which you submitted the original project and got your Measure D. And I'm not suggesting that the applicant go back and do a new Measure D. I just raise this as a concern for this planning commission. I'd love the feedback of my fellow commissioners on this. And if city staff have an opinion, I mean, I read the staff report, but I really am more concerned about what my fellow commissioners think about this.
I don't necessarily have any comment on what you just said, but I do understand your perspective. But on that same line, we have a residential guideline, a residential building guideline, design guidelines, and those change all the time because they're just guidelines, right? So are you considering this to be, is Measure D a guideline? Because these are not really necessarily things that, well, it's necessary, but maybe I'm incorrect in thinking this, is the condition for that many points for a deed restriction in our code, in our zoning code? So those points are definitely in the zoning code. The designation of, what is it, 30, is it 35 points?
I think it is.
It is in the zoning code, okay, all right.
I think, so I would separate out the design guidelines from the Measure D. I think they're two separate things in my experience. The Measure D is, do I have a project that I know I can build in the foreseeable future as long as I meet all these other criteria, if I don't ask for a variance? And so the concern I have is, like, right now, we had, 40 Measure D approvals, and people have designed projects that include an accessory dwelling unit, maybe a low-income accessory dwelling unit, so they're exercising gamesmanship to get a project approved. And I think, 20 Measure Ds were consumed by ADUs for existing projects that combined single-family projects, something like that. I don't want to get bogged down in the details. My concern is that not the design guidelines, which we know are flexible, and the ARC gives us feedback on all of these things. It's more about how do I get my project so that I know I can actually have something that's developable. People, once they know, oh, I got over the line, now I'm going to rescind whatever is I agreed to because I knew I could get this approval in 2021 versus whatever the standards were in 2023. That's my concern. It's like, it just feels wrong. And, you know, would love the perspective of my other commissioners. And so I would separate them, Commissioner Joannis, if like one is, once the project has gone through the Measure D, then there's a process that we need to go through to approve the project and make sure it conforms with the development guidelines and other standards under city code. This is Measure D gets the applicant through the first gate, if you will.
Commissioner Gorn?
I actually found myself wondering the same thing when I went through this, and you know, not necessarily for this project, but I think that if you do this as a sort of a way of doing things, the city way of doing things, then everyone is going to put a bunch of things in there that they don't necessarily want to do, and once they get the approval, they take them off. Like, you know, they can pick and choose what they want to take off. If another applicant had that choice, who was refused a Measure D, if they had a choice to add something, they probably would, if they knew the line, just, you know, what they had to do to cross that line. So I don't think that, you know, in this particular project, I don't really feel like it's sort of an issue, but I think as a city policy, I think that's a big issue.
Can I ask a clarifying question based on what Chair Hernandez was talking about? So when they decided not to enact a deed restriction on the ADU, ranking points were pulled away, 35 plus maybe 5 others. Now, say, for example, 40 points or 45 points were pulled away and they fell below the line. Would they have lost their opportunity to develop on this site?
That Measure D would have been compromised. It would no longer be valid. We're glad you brought this up. It's a really hard issue, and we were careful to check the points here and to make sure not only that this project remained above the line, but that it didn't affect the ranking of any other project. That said, as this has gotten more and more competitive, you've probably noticed some of the things that we've been doing to document Measure D obligations in conditions of approval. The letters that staff sends out when Measure D allocations are granted list those commitments that were made in those applications to keep it at front of mind for the applicant. Sometimes they don't have full project plans at that point, and we want them to have those on hand to work with their designer and architect to make sure they incorporate everything at the planning stage and then again at the building permit stage. I do want to note that we are not surprised about having real concern about putting deed restriction on an ADU. It is something that you've heard our city council talk about at the last meeting you were with them. It's a big commitment, and it's possibly not that helpful in some cases. There could be some definite upside, as you heard, for some affordable housing opportunities that came through the housing element. But we have never had an applicant, other than one that you had this year, put in writing that they were going to do it. You saw that come through Measure D this spring. So it's a difficult thing, and now that we've gone through this a few times, we really quiz our applicants. A number of them come in fresh at the counter and say, oh yes, I will do that. because they know it's competitive, and then we say, well, this is what that means. And they, almost all of them say, oh, I didn't realize that was what the commitment was. So I'm sorry that this has come at this point. We were really disappointed because we were excited to have this unit come forward. That said, we also are aware that through the different surveys that have been done for what ADUs are leasing for, it is still a useful unit. It's an important unit to come forward on a lot this big. We would really hope for an ADU, and maybe in the future there's room for a JDU inside the house as well, because there's so many square feet there. And those smaller units they do tend to be a little bit more affordable, as they say, by design, but we know you're not getting what came forward first, and where we agree with our chair that this was a concerning matter.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else want to offer
On that issue?
comments? Or on any issue
Okay,
with
so
this project?
So this house design and project seems really clearly well thought out and very appealing. There seems to be one issue, and that's the height variance. And so it is in a coastal zone, a coastal view corridor, and so that is a problem to me. And I think that's sort of that's really the only issue that I have with this project. I feel like this is a really supportable project, but I have a big problem with height variance in a coastal view corridor.
Thank you. Commissioner Ruddick?
Thank you. I concur with what Commissioner Gorn just said about the design of the house. I think that, as articulated in the staff report, the choice of colors and materials and everything else would be a credit to the neighborhood and Half Moon Bay. I visited the site while the story poles were up, and I was impressed with how dramatically the view corridor from Highway 1 down, I forget the name of that street that runs east-west. Pine Avenue. I was impressed with how dramatically the siting of the house and the ADU will protect that view corridor. And I realize that the applicant is making compromises in what they're able to build in order to be to be in compliance with the city's requirements about the view corridor, and has made some compromises in the design. I think, as it says in the staff report, the proposed residence otherwise is nearly in conformance with the neighborhood agreement as possible. And the request for the height variance, you never want to take those things lightly, but I believe that it isn't sort of a frivolous request for a height variance. It's a pretty important part of the design that's integral to what they're trying to do there. The AAC unanimously approved of it. And as Scott said in the staff report, this is similar to what you might find with a chimney that extends in many of our zonings above the literal height limit. So I think taking all those factors into account, and especially the willingness of the applicant to work to protect that view corridor from Highway 1 down Pine Avenue to the ocean, that I would support the request for a height variance.
Thank you, Commissioner Ruddick. Commissioner Joannis?
Yes. Again, I wanted to just say that I did look at the past commission meetings on July 11, 2017, and I think there was a lot of discussion about the height limits, and I think it was the chair actually Hernandez, I think you were chair then at the time, made a very specific statement saying that the city needs to be very cautious about height limits specified in the neighborhood agreement, especially as it, affects properties around it. So I'm wondering what would have changed now about those properties. And I did walk down Pine Street, and you're correct, the applicant has done a lot of things to move it, but you can still see the the tower from Pine Street, and I walked on every side of Pine Street, and you can still see it. So that height variance is, although it gives a lot more clearance because they moved it, it's still visible from the top of Pine Street and as you walk down. So, the rule is the view corridor, it's what's in code. And, what precedence does it set for this Metucci agreement? Because the neighborhood agreement, because we have a potential property at 32 Jenna Lane that might come up again, or, and so that's my concern about this height variance.
Through the
Thank
chair.
you. Yes, Chair Hernandez?
I want to echo the same points that Commissioner Johannes has made. I mean, I recall two things. One, the specific comments. I don't recall the exact details of what I said in 2017, but at the time, there's a lot of concern raised by the neighbors about failure from the city and the previous owner of the properties to comply with the original Metucci plan. And my intention, that I'll post facto apply, is that we have some kind of standard, right? Because the neighbors wanted something, the city agreed to something. And so I want to make sure that under the current Metucci development plan or planned unit development that we have a standard. And my understanding is that that standard that has been put into our LUP is now being met. So that there was no standard before. There was a promise that was arguably broken. But now we've set a standard. And my question is, yes, there's a standard, and there's a variance being asked for against that standard. Could city staff clarify?
Staff will jump in just briefly. Because the city was not a party to the agreement, it was really challenging for the commission to work through the desires and hopes of the neighbors and meet their expectations in that they had been a party to this agreement. And so to that end, to the best of their ability in reviewing that particular design, I recall that they worked through a way to have an agreement with the applicant, and it was documented in a condition of approval, which was kind of the best that they could do at the time since the agreement wasn't in place. When I worked on the land use plan, we put in new policies for the existing or substantially developed planned developments. And for this one, it really struck a chord with me working on it because of that meeting and appreciating that the neighborhood agreement could be brought into that PD through policy without having to amend the specific plan or without having to have the agreement readopted. Now, it therefore reduced the height of the PD. Scott, I think is the specific plan at 30 feet or 28 feet? 28?
28 feet.
28, which matches our R1 height limit and drops that down a bit. And so You're seeing a house before you today where the majority of the structure meets that height limit, and I think this graphic is helpful. And there's the one architectural feature of that staircase enclosure that is projecting up above that. Staff brought this for you because we did not see that this projection interfered with any of the intents of the height limit. It wasn't blocking any of the particular views that have been cited as being protected. So that was why we thought it was appropriate for you to have the chance to see it. And if you have more questions about that, we can dig up our documents on that, but that's my context for it.
And just to follow up on that, so thank you for this this view. It's super helpful. So the portion of the structure that exceeds the 22-foot limit, that's not obstructing a broad ocean view. So if I look at the projects directly to the existing housing directly to the east of it, even this, like everything else except for the bit above the plane that you've drawn here is well below most of the housing I see to the east. But specifically this little notch that sticks up is subordinate to the condos that are immediately to the east. So you're not obstructing a view, and it's relatively minor in comparison. Is that a fair assessment of what's happening here?
Go ahead, Commissioner Gore.
So, from my point of view, it doesn't look like a chimney. And it's a public view corridor, and towers always make an impact. So the fact that it sticks up a little bit over the 22-foot height means that there is a tower below that your eye follows, and that you see a tower. Just like you see the fire tower every time you pass that part of Main Street. It's a tower, and it's the view, from my point of view, is actually, there's two sides of that view, because the view that you see from, Highway 1 and Pine and whatever, but there's also the view that you see from the Coastal Trail and from the other side, where that house will be visible, and that tower will be visible, and that's what you'll see, is that tower. So, granting a height variance in general is like, I don't really, variances are not great, height variances are not great, but a height variance in a public view corridor seems problematic.
Through the chair.
Yes, Commissioner Hernandez? Or
So
Chair Hernandez?
The view from Highway 1 to the ocean that is currently unobstructed is protected. And the view from the coastal trail to the ridgetop of the Santa Cruz Mountains is also protected. And my point about subordination is one of, and this is the question I had for city staff, was, does this materially change the existing view of either the broad ocean view from Highway 1, the part that's being asked for variance, does it change the view from Highway 1 to the ocean, or does it change the view from the coastal trail to the ridgetop of the Santa Cruz Mountains in a material way? Or is it subordinate? Like, in other words, there's something behind there that's already going to block the view that doesn't make a big difference. That was where I was trying to go, Commissioner Gorn. I understand your view of, like, from certain perspectives, it's big and it's obstructive and it may not be what we want, but there's a definition of a protected view that we have to think about.
Thank you. Commissioner Ruddick?
Thank you. Yes, I hear you, Commissioner Gorn, on these concerns. I think that there's some subjectivity involved in all of this. It seems to me that the view from the coastal trail to the east, we're talking about some hundreds of yards there, and I'd be surprised if that's a material problem. I also think that perhaps you're using the concept of the corridor a little more broadly than it really is written up. I think that's why the view from the town boulevard, from Highway 1 to the west down Pine Street is really so important and is protected. And that's why I give credit to the applicant for making some real compromises to protect that corridor. I think if you're in general walking north or south on Jenna Avenue and you can see the top of that staircase, I don't think that qualifies as obstructing the corridor. I also would disagree with you a little bit on the concept of the tower. I think as the plans show, the top of that staircase is not a tower like at the fire station, but is coming out of the main structure of the house. To me, that makes a difference in terms of how it impacts me visually, but I don't know if that would lessen the damage in your mind or not.
So it's in between a fire tower and a chimney.
Okay.
I mean, look, I had a very strong opinion on the fire tower because it proudly stood above the original fire tower that was not approved and was rejected by City Council, as Commissioner Conroy said, stood proudly above everything else around it and made things around it subordinate, and it blocked the view of the ridge line. That was his beef and my beef at the time, and the City Council agreed with us. I mean, I think that we have an obligation to protect certain specific types of views. Now, you could take the view that this doesn't meet the criteria for a variance, and that's, I think, perfectly reasonable, but I don't think it's about a protected view of the ocean or a protected view of the ridge line. That's my perspective on this, and I think it's a little different than the fire tower in that regard.
Thank you. I had a couple things I wanted to discuss. Other than the height variance, I wanted to talk to city staff about the stormwater calculations, because I noticed that they require stormwater management that would meet a 10-year frequency storm of a 2-hour duration, and it doesn't seem practical when we're having storms of greater than 10-year frequency. I mean, we just recently had a 500-year storm on New Year's Eve, and we had many atmospheric rivers this winter, yet we're only requiring, a stormwater management plan that handles a 10-year frequency. So I wanted to bring that up. The first thing I failed to bring up was I wanted to thank the applicant for having the open house, because I thought the open house was just wonderful. And I know she spent multiple days on site to meet with neighbors to talk about the project. So I failed to compliment you on that. I wanted to thank you. And the Rocky Road was very good, yes. But yeah, so the stormwater calculation to me seems very problematic for maybe the applicant and the neighbors, given the nature of storms that we're currently having. And then the height restriction, I did just pull up the Matushi agreement, and, this was a neighborhood agreement that, I understand for 20 years they weren't able to follow the agreement, but now it has been codified. So I did also go back to the 2016, 17, 2018 meetings, and it seemed that the commissioners at the time were very concerned about maintaining the 22-foot height on structures, yet, and it was, they indicated that they had the discretion to possibly enact a 22-foot height restriction, but yet at the time it wasn't codified, so other structures in the neighborhood went up beyond the 22 feet. So I walked the site, I walked Pine Avenue multiple times, I drove down the street, and I do appreciate that the view corridor is kept open with the placement of the home north on the lot. But I am a bit concerned about the height variance, and thank you. Does anyone want to make a motion? Or are there any other comments?
What?
Oh,
Thank you,
Commissioner Ruddick?
Chair. In our packet, there is a letter which I believe the architect wrote at some point about the seeking of the height variance, and I thought it was persuasive to me in some ways that they had struggled to put this, worked hard to put this floor plan together that it could exist within the 22-foot limit, and we're seeking just this small variance in order to be able to make use of the deck on the roof in such a scenic place. And I thought that was, to me, I mean, I'm not, as you all know, I'm not normally eager to seek variances to the law of the land, but in this case, that seemed to me a very reasonable explanation of how the applicant and her team had worked to make this a reality. So again, to repeating myself, but that top of the cover for the staircase that would stick 4 feet above the 22-foot limit is a very small percent of the overall roof line, and I would support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Ruddick. Does anyone else wish to speak? Oh, the applicant, Chair Hernandez?
Yeah, I also echo Commissioner Ruddick's comments. I mean, I think that in the grand scheme of things, this is a relatively minor variance that materially improves the ability of the applicant to enjoy their property. And what's important to me here is that the applicant has worked with the neighbors, and the one neighbor who has submitted written objections to this specific project has rescinded all of her concerns after having those concerns addressed. And I don't know what other conversations have happened with other neighbors, but I can tell you for other projects we've had along Jenna Lane, people have shown up with pitchforks and torches. And materially, this applicant has gone through a process to address feedback. And by observation, I think has worked closely with city staff to try to put together a project that addresses the material concerns while asking for a specific exception that, improves their ability to enjoy the project. So that's all that I have to say on this. And yeah.
Thank you, Chair Hernandez. Chair,
So I think we're pretty much all in consensus that this is a solid project and needs to be approved. I know we haven't voted yet, but I have no problem with this project at all. But a height variance is serious, and that is a tower. And so, I think that we just need to, before we start talking about, a motion, I think we need to just kind of come to some kind of consensus about whether that's okay or not. So if everyone feels like that's okay, then I'm happy to go with that. But just the applicant has done everything really well, and the applicant would change this project if we felt like the height variance shouldn't be granted. So.
Commissioner Joannis, please.
I too love this project. I love the design. I love the environmental considerations that they put into this. I actually stayed in a lot of, I've stayed at Sea Ranch, fell in love with that community. I see that there is a lot of resemblance between this house and the homes in Sea Ranch. Sea Ranch is the way it is because they stick to the rules, and they stick to the variances, and they stick to the common understanding of those agreements that that community put in place. And I see here that we do have an agreement and with the neighborhood. And I think it's important for us to consider that. Variances are important. I recall in early 2000s, there was a house that in town that was built above the height. And I think they were asked to take it down. So, I don't know if this is true or not, but I recall that earlier on where there was a height variance and, a house that was built without a height variance. And so this is an important thing, and I would want to make sure that we understand that if we start making variances for 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, we're setting precedents, and we're setting precedents for this neighborhood again, for that other property that might come up again. So I'm more concerned about policy, procedure, precedent setting, what makes us feel that, a house that's not in this neighborhood that has a 28-foot variance and somebody says, oh, well, you granted that house over there 1 foot over, why can't I go over 1 foot and I want a 29-foot tall house? I can't see that difference, and that's making this decision very difficult for me.
Thank you. Commissioner Ruddick, please.
I hear you, Commissioner Joannis. That's why these things should never be entered into lightly. I think the reality is that the requests and sometimes approval of variances depend very much on case-by-case considerations and details, and the setting of a precedent that doesn't typically end up changing the way the city operates. I was trying, in studying the packet, I was trying to imagine what the alternative would be to having a covering on that staircase that extended above the 22-foot line, and there isn't much detail given, but it is said that the AAC considered some other options which they found to be much less attractive and would denigrate the design of the house. And I imagine they were talking about things like a ladder on the side of the house or something that was uncovered, on a staircase that was uncovered or something. So I come back to what Chair Hernandez was articulate about a few minutes ago, which is, in the big scheme of things, this is a request for quite a small variance that is not going to have a big impact on the visual quality of the neighborhood, and yet it will materially improve the residents' enjoyment of their property, which I think is not a trivial concern.
Thank you. Chair Hernandez?
Yeah, I think the other benefit we have is we have an architectural advisory committee that is staffed by professional architects and designers. who have gone through an extensive review process, provided extensive feedback, and expressed a strong opinion about the design element with respect to, one, does it conform with our residential design guidelines generally, but two, like, do they see it as conforming with the big picture policy requirements we have as a city? And so we're all going to vote however we're going to vote, but that is something that I take to heart when I think about this project, is the degree to which the professionals we've asked to be on our advisory committee have looked at this project and weighed in with their strong endorsement on it.
And I would also like to add to that, Chair Hernandez, I'm thankful for that architectural committee, because viewing the old planning commission meetings, you guys considered architectural design and compatibility in addition to all the other land use issues that need to be considered.
We still have an obligation to express an opinion on that, but I feel less burdened by having professionals weigh in.
Yes. And with this design, I will say I love the design. I think it's beautiful. It's going to be a beautiful home.
I have a question, maybe staff can help.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at, Scott, you mentioned that you provided information about the height variance findings for 1823.10. Can you give us an example of what would be evidence that would not be recommended? Like, what would it be? What would have to happen for something not to be recommended for height variance? Other than, okay, so the view corridor, but this is specifically towards the affect adversely the health and safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood.
While Scott looks that over, I'm going to share a couple other thoughts that are related to what you're bringing forward. One of the considerations that the Architectural Advisory Committee and the architect and then staff had was that as Commissioner Reddick was describing, alternate approaches would have exterior staircases attached to the side of the structure. What we found was design-wise that wasn't as desirable, but frankly, it was more intrusive from the perspective of privacy to other properties, and this enclosure does improve that relationship. So we saw that there was something there. We wanted, obviously this is in your hands, and we wanted you to have all the information possible, but that was a consideration and it hasn't come out in the discussion.
So I'd be happy to clarify. So I looked over the finding, and it primarily deals with whether or not the granting of the variance would have any detrimental effect on the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood. And in the presentation, I mentioned that we have 4 houses, at least 4, that exceed 22 feet in height, and which includes the massing of the building as opposed to just a small element, to the new house. This is also directly across the street from a multifamily zoning district that allows for, I believe it's 32. It's either 32 or 36 feet in height. So this is directly across the street, albeit a different zoning district, but we have many houses in the vicinity that exceed 22 feet in height for more than half of the bulk of the building. I think it's also helpful to just read out the item on the Matucci subdivision appeal agreement that deals with a 22-foot height limitation. So I'll go ahead and read it. no roof to exceed 22 feet on any of the lots except lot number 2. And then in parentheses, it says 24.5 feet with a 1.5-foot open guardrail, provided that the second story not exceed 727 square feet, dated June 11th, 2001. And lot number 6 shall not exceed 28 feet in height, which is actually the height limit for the Matucci development standards. So, you know, a little bit of what I would characterize as sort of gray language. It's not cut and dry. It's allowing for, you know, some other building, some other houses within the Matucci subdivision to exceed the 22-foot in height. So, you know, granting this small, you know, portion of the building to exceed 22 feet in height, in my opinion, would not be detrimental or injurious to people that live in the vicinity. So hopefully that's helpful.
First, we have Chair Hernandez and then Commissioner Gorn.
And again, previous projects, people showed up with pitchforks and torches on projects that were a lot taller, or that had, there are all kinds of interesting terms that were introduced from a planning perspective in those previous projects that Commissioner Joannis may be able to recall more eloquently than I, but there are no comments from the neighbors in this immediate community opposing or representing concerns about this project at this point. So those are the facts that I'm looking at.
Through the chair, the city attorney and I would like to just give you a couple other notes that we think might be helpful. By the way, the height limit in the R3 zoning district across the street is 40 feet. There's not much in that district that's built to that height, so let's be mindful that that doesn't say the whole story. But back to this variance before you, we've been wondering if maybe you at some point want to take a straw poll just on that particular item. But we hear you, you're very concerned about precedents. We're always very concerned about precedents. When you think about granting a variance, one of the things that I have always coached staff in as a zoning hearing officer who used to hear variances is, would you grant it again and would you be happy about it? And you really need to think through the corner cases and how open it is. And of course, Commissioner Joannis brought up precedent-setting nature of this. We don't believe that the scope of this goes beyond the Matucci PUD. I don't see that this would be precedent-setting for an R1 zone for the going over 28 feet to 29 feet. This is a special district. It has a special agreement, and it has a really interesting history of which lot got how much height here and there and for what reasons. And the scope is really narrow. So, and the variance is small too. So we just want to reassure you that we wouldn't have brought this to you if we didn't think it was pretty confined. Again, we appreciate the discussion and the challenge of it. And if you have anything else that you want us to look up and share with you, we will.
Okay.
Maybe you want to take a straw poll on this issue. That might be the way to go.
Okay. All right. We've never done that before, so Bridget?
Through the chair, I think
It's new.
Yes.
Yeah, let's get winners.
It's not on the agenda.
Yeah, this is kind of, we're crossing new territory here from my experience.
Just one moment. Commissioner Ruddick would like to speak.
Yes, I don't know exactly how the straw poll should work, but I am prepared to make a motion to approve the resolution at hand, but we all should discuss how we feel about that.
I'm willing to second the motion and open it for discussion.
Okay. Commissioner Gorn? Not yet? Okay.
Go ahead. What do you think?
What do I think?
So what's the question at hand? I'm new to a lot, so I'm trying to learn.
Well, if we approve the resolution, it is approving the application for a coastal development permit, the height variance, and architectural review. If we approve the resolution as it exists right now.
And so we can make amendments to the resolution, we can attach conditions to the resolution, or we can say, yeah, we support that, I think. Or we can say, nah, we don't. And if there's a specific concern, which might be the variance on the project with respect to height, then I think discussion is the opportunity to present that. And if I've misstated anything or done anything inappropriate, I would ask our city attorney to weigh in and intercept the discussions before we go anywhere that's inappropriate.
Yes, that all sounds fine, and that accomplishes, I think, the same idea as a straw poll. I think now is just the time to talk about, you know, if you are not comfortable with the variance and if you'd like to suggest amendments to the motion, that now's the time, or if you are comfortable with it, to say, I think since Commissioner Ruddick made the motion, sounds like you are comfortable with it. But now's the time to just discuss and talk about whether you would want to make any changes to it before there's an actual roll call vote taken.
Well, I'm not sure that I did formally make a motion, but maybe I will do so, and this will help us drive the discussion. So I move we approve PDP 21-062, an application for a coastal development permit, height variance, and architectural review at 8 Jenna Lane.
And I will reiterate that I support that motion.
Through the chair, staff did provide a friendly amendment to the landscape condition, and I finally figured out how to put it on the screen.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so it's condition, oh, can you see it? Yep. Okay, good. You have it before you. We wanted to enhance the condition by acknowledging that staff would recheck the landscape planting plan, looking for maximum mature height of plant material relative to the 7-foot limit in the Matucci Neighborhood Agreement. And then it continues with the installation standard condition.
Thank you for that.
By the way, just as a point, if Commissioner Ruddick wants to amend his proposal, the spite hedges or the spite landscaping is the concept that this addresses, which was raised in multiple public meetings in the past on other projects in Jenna Lane, which is people have things that are super tall and they obstruct the view to the ocean from the 25, 30-foot view of the condos across the street from the projects. So I think that's a helpful amendment.
Well, if it's procedurally correct, then I would like to tack on that amendment to my original motion.
And I think I heard Chair Hernandez say he would second the modified motion. Correct.
I put myself on mute, but I second the motion.
Okay. Okay. We're going to do a roll call. So Commissioner
Well,
Ruddick.
we should,
oh, they want to discuss?
Yeah, I think the point was to get the motion out there, but to not be hasty to shut off discussion about it. Sorry,
Correct.
Thank you,
excuse me.
thank you for that. I will say, I do really like the project. I am conflicted about the height variance, but yet I think Commissioner Hernandez, Chair Hernandez, brought up a really good point that we don't have anyone from the public here objecting to the variance, the height variance, as compared to the meetings in 2016, 17, and 18 that I viewed on regarding the 32 Jenna Lane. And I think that's really important to hear from the public. And the fact that we're not hearing from the public, to me, is very important. That's an important point. Thank you.
Those are all good points, but just because somebody has not come to a meeting, it does not necessarily mean they're for or against anything. It might mean that they couldn't come to the meeting. It might mean that they didn't know that this was something that was of this importance for them. So being in attendance to a meeting, it does not necessarily mean somebody is for something or against something.
Thank you for that.
And I am conflicted about the variance. I love this project. And I don't even know if I could ask this question. Are there other options keeping this design, but perhaps the tower is, is there something that can be done? This is a great project.
The architect would like
Yeah,
to
that's
address
actually what I
us.
was
I would
gonna
love to hear
ask.
from
Is
Stuart.
this a deal breaker for you?
Well, I just want to thank the committee and staff and everybody who's been involved in the process. But, with regard to the Matucci plan and the height restrictions, to your point about Sea Ranch, you're right. It is what it is because of all the rules and regulations, and those rules and regulations have brought us here today via the Coastal Commission. I would say quite the opposite is true about the Matucci plan. We are at the 22-foot height requirement in the Matucci plan almost because of a folly of history. A bunch of neighbors got together on the last lot and said, we don't want that lot to be any taller than our lot. And then it got codified, and here we are. So we've done everything we could possibly do to satisfy the community, the city, the environment, and really all we're asking for is that little sliver of and I wouldn't even call it a tower, it's just a staircase, and we've worked through, I have a number of options I can have you look at, where I tried to find an aesthetic solution to a staircase to the roof for the benefit of the homeowner, and more so the benefit of the family dog, Juno, who will go up there and keep an eye on the neighborhood. So I'll share these with you later.
So just double checking, these are plans without the variance that's necessary? Okay.
I think you'll notice they don't tie the buildings as a composition together as well, and they don't provide the quality of building that I would like to produce, a watertight, architecture sheds water. That's what it does. We have to have a roof on those stairs. It's very hard to have a roof deck with a covered staircase that goes,
This one.
that's below 22 feet.
I mean, we
But
have,
it's open.
yeah, but a lot of staircases are open, mine is, right?
Oh, that looks better.
This one, right?
Sorry, but that looks better.
I guess it's this one,
Or this one. This one's got more appeal.
more
to me.
architectural.
Yeah. That-
I'm not an architect.
Yeah, I'm not an architect,
So
but I
these
like it.
top two,
Through the chair, I'm operating at a deficit, so
Could you please provide those to us? Yeah, we really need to provide this to the public. Thank you. And then
He's got a zip drive.
Scott
We're going to put it on the computer.
Scott will put it up, and then Chair Hernandez will be able to see it.
So I've spent a lot of time debating, is A better than B versus C from a design perspective? And with architects on the Planning Commission in the past. And I find that I don't necessarily feel confident from an architectural perspective to just view on something without feedback from the Architectural Advisory Committee. And so while we're looking at this in real time, we haven't had a chance to look at it. I put great stock in the fact that we've had our professional architects who are part of AARC think about this, look at that, provide feedback, and the applicant has gone down a path based on that feedback. Now, if the applicant said to us today, hey, you know what? Love the ARC, but I'm happy to just move forward with alternative B, alternative C, I've got no issues moving forward with something the applicant is happy to take on today. But I get a little concerned when we're designing things on the fly. And so if we're going to go down this process, I would seek a continuance on the project versus us trying to design something on the fly at wherever we're at in California. 9:15 California time. I just get a little concerned about it.
I think there's just been concern about a height variance. I actually don't think that any of the three of us are adamant about this height variance. I am deeply concerned about it, though. So if the applicant has an alternative plan that would work, that seems like a possible solution.
To be clear, the ones that I showed you don't work.
Explain.
Well, they don't work from architectural cohesiveness. They're not of the, like the red one is not of the style of Sea Ranch, and the other two are like the boxed one with the removed top. Aside from it not being water secure, it's just ugly. And then I would say the same with the other one. I'm not comfortable as an architect providing a project that has a staircase of that magnitude without a roof. Because, water comes down there, it's going to be, for one, it's not going to be cost effective because I'm going to have to make it steel or something extremely waterproof inside there. And then, the design that we are proposing, the tower actually does more than just be waterproof. It ties the complex together. It gives the complex a focal point so that all the buildings have something central to look at, and as well, I think it provides a wayfinding feature for the neighborhood. It's placemaking, so I think the project that we've presented succeeds on a number of levels where these actually detract from it.
So we're saying it's more form versus function at this point in time?
Yes, I would
So-
say that about the entire project, yes.
So we're going for more of an iconic structure, asking for a variance, and that's where I'm getting myself in a very much of a bind right now, because I love what you presented, but again, it's form versus function. It's the variance to accommodate form and an iconic structure, and that's my concern.
Variance to accommodate function.
But again, like, I get when you stand on Jenna Lane and maybe you're looking directly west and looking at this and looking at story poles, you're like, huh, it kind of blocks my view. It's subordinate to everything around it. There's a building that could be 40 foot tall. It's probably something like 32 or 34 feet high immediately to the east of this project. So it's not like you're blocking a broad ocean view. It's interesting. It accomplishes an architectural objective that the ARC has unanimously endorsed, and it's subordinate to the immediate structures to the west of it. Sorry, to the east of it. I have a hard time, and we've looked at this type of stuff in the past. So I think I'm generally concerned about height variances, and I've been overridden on height variances on specific projects in the past. But this one, I don't know. I don't think it's material. And this is where I lean into the ARC's perspective here.
Thank you. Winter, our attorney, would like, Commissioner Gorn? Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, through the chair. It sounds to me, what I'm hearing is that there's maybe not very much concern about the design. The design is appreciated. There's more concern about opening up the door to future variances if this variance is granted. And so I'm wondering if maybe one way to approach that is to actually bulk up the variance findings to make it very specific, maybe add some language around the fact that, there has been consideration of design that would have met the 22-foot height limit, and that the variance would actually enhance the architectural integrity and design of this project, so that in the future, if somebody points back to this and says, well, you let them have a 4-foot variance, why can't I? There would be more information in the findings to differentiate this particular case from something that happens in the future. I think there's already quite a bit of that in the findings, talking about the specifics of the Matucci subdivision, that, the specific plan actually has 28 feet. This was a sort of specific overlay on top of that. But I just wanted to offer that as maybe a way of moving forward if that addresses the concern without modifying the design.
Thank you for that.
So,
Commissioner Gorn?
yeah, to me, that doesn't really address it. I mean, we're talking about, granting a height variance, which is a big thing, and why do we have to have that? Why do we have to have it? Yes, the whole thing looks great. We're going to approve it. It's wonderful. But granting a height variance, you need a real concrete answer about why this has to be done this way. And I haven't heard that yet. So I'm happy to hear that. If there was more than, like you just don't want to, I would love to hear it. But so that's sort of what it's sounding like to me.
Well, so I don't like approving height variances willy-nilly, just to be clear. I think there's a compromise. It's been 2 compromises that I've heard And I would love to get city staff's perspective on this. The first compromise is with respect to the view corridor along, I think it's Pine, that's been more amply protected by design compromises that have been made. The second one is there's been feedback around moving the project further away from one of the neighbors. So those are examples of compromises that have been made in this design that, I think are important. But, it's a project as a whole. That's what we have to look at. So, but those are some of the compromises that I think have been made. And if city staff have an opinion on how we got here, that they'd like to reinforce, I think they've made some of those points, but I'd be happy to hear them as long as the acting chair is accommodating.
Yes, of course. Just one moment.
We are working on a few technical things. Would the chair mind if we could take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
That
Let's
would be
take a
helpful
5-minute
to
break.
us right now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Are you cold? Oh, do you want to wear mine?
No, I'm
It
good.
might be- okay.
city attorney has a couple more words for you as you continue.
Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Staff doesn't really have anything substantive to add, factual to add. I think.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Oh, is this better? Yeah? Oh,
You should hear now. Can you hear? Okay,
Okay.
that was me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
great. Thank you. I was just saying that staff doesn't really have anything more to add to the record on kind of how we got here in terms of bringing this design forward. We think that was, it's been discussed pretty extensively in the staff report and in this discussion tonight. So I think my recommendation would be to move forward with a vote on Commissioner Ruddock's motion. You would need 3 votes for that motion to pass. If you don't get 3 votes, then somebody else could bring a motion, perhaps to continue this matter either to a date certain or a date uncertain with directions for changes that you would like to see to the project as a way of kind of moving this forward.
Thank you, Winter. Commissioner Gorn, you wanted to make a comment?
Just really briefly. I just want to, so I don't want to sound like an alarmist tone. Mostly I want to say congratulations on your project. That's going to be a beautiful house. And we're just going to have to approve the height variance or not. That's all.
Or not?
I don't know if that's new ground or old.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Gorn.
Through the chair, we have to either approve the project with the variance or do something else. And so I think the first measure is, do we approve the project? And if we don't approve the project, I think to our attorney's advice, we can submit an alternative approach. So, yeah, I think it'd be good to go ahead and make the vote would be my recommendation.
Thank you for that, Chair Hernandez. So are you guys ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay, Bridget?
Commissioner Reddick?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Johannes?
I vote no.
Commissioner Gorn?
No, thanks.
Acting Chair Gossett?
No.
Chair Hernandez?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay, so do we want to introduce another motion? Yes, yes. So, let me pull up something here.
So I mean, I think the only other motion is without the height variance, with
Yeah,
Not
so we
approving
could
height variance.
have a motion to continue, for continuation to maybe eliminate the height variance.
You also have the architect that may want to speak.
Oh,
It's up to you.
I know Commissioner Hernandez mentioned that he was troubled by approving something that didn't go to the ARC, but we do have a proposal that's very similar that we would accept approval tonight.
okay. Do we have a digital copy of that? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Is this one? This is the same?
Yeah, I think it's different.
Oh. Scott, are you loading the plans?
Yes, just give him a moment.
Oh, okay, there, okay.
Yes, the plans should be available, should be able
On
to
your
see them
screen.
on screen.
Through the chair, we would request that you allow for the architect to describe what you're viewing. The staff can quickly read these plans, but this is a really unusual circumstance to not have seen the plans in advance, and we want to make sure that for the good of the order, everyone has the same information, and if it is not adequate for you, we'd recommend that you continue the item.
Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Yeah,
Chair.
and also I just wanted to ask if this particular plan is something that's been through the Architectural Advisory Committee and gotten their thumbs up.
No.
Okay. I heard no.
Yeah, that was for me, Stuart Grinnell, architect.
Okay.
I'll just describe it, the essential components of the design that we prefer is still there. We lowered the tower, the slope roof on the top of the tower to the 22-foot mark. Obviously, there wouldn't be a staircase extending in that stair tower to the third floor roof deck. We've substituted that stair to the third floor roof deck with a circular stair coming off of the rear second story deck. So the tower's still there, the roof deck's still there. The only difference is the tower is down now to 22 feet, and there's a circular stair off the second floor deck up to the third floor roof deck. Very minimal change, accomplishes all the previous goals, and is within the, doesn't need a variance.
Thank you.
Vice Chair?
Yes.
At first blush, it sounds like a promising direction. I very much agree with Chair Hernandez that it would be a perversion of our process for us to act on this without the AAC giving us the benefit of their wisdom. And I think it would be really hard for me to digest what you've just handed over and make an intelligent decision on it tonight.
Yeah, this is.
But it's the same project. It's the same project without the height variance.
Yeah, I don't think it's a perversion. I just think that the architectural decision is now passed to us, and we have to determine, can we make the judgment now or not? I don't think it's a perversion, though. I just think it's just, we're now taking on that. We already have that responsibility. We could just act in accordance with the feedback we get from the Architectural Advisory Committee. If
It's not best practices.
okay, so we can. So here's what I would propose. Maybe we take a vote. Are we ready to approve this now, or do we want to just do a continuance? I mean, the applicant said they want to. Hey, they're okay with this now. If we want, we can also just do a continuance.
Well, may I ask staff if that's, is this really workable? I mean, such a significant change to something that isn't really documented except for this one artist's rendition. Can the Planning Commission actually approve such a thing in a sort of raw state like that?
Can I ask, is this really that raw, or is this just, it's the same? Yes, it's not anything different, except the tower.
Staff has a few thoughts for you. I'm going to be very honest. We're disappointed to just see this now, and it would have been helpful for this commission to have had the benefit to have considered this in their packet, and I would have appreciated that. It is a modification that is pretty targeted to just 2 elements, and we can see that. I would suggest that if you're comfortable with it, that maybe you add a condition of approval, that Scott and I could take it to the Architectural Advisory Committee just so that they can acknowledge it and take a look at some of the detailing. Sometimes that committee catches construction issues with things like that are exterior. They really understand the coastal environment, and I know this architect does as well, but we just would want to give them the chance to look at design integrity and the connection of materials and how that's being done. If there was any more to it, and I wasn't hearing your comfort level, I would be very much encouraging you to continue. But I see a little opening for you if you're comfortable with that idea.
Chair Hernandez?
If the applicant's willing to go down this path and the rest of us are comfortable with the project as a whole, and we're delegating pro forma feedback from the Architectural Advisory Committee, I think that's consistent with a few other things we've done in the past. But I think that's, would love the applicant's feedback on that.
We would be willing to take approval with the condition that it be reviewed by the Architectural Review Committee.
Thank you, Stuart. I have go ahead. Jill, I would like to know, in the event you take this plan to the Architectural Committee and they don't like it, I mean, how does that, and then we approved it, but, I mean, how does that work?
I'm not concerned about their design perspective at that point. It's substantially similar. I do think that if they had any concerns, that they would offer suggestions for making really teeny tiny modifications here and there that staff can then review. It's a fair question, though. I wouldn't have suggested it if I was worried about it in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, if we send it to the Architectural Advisory Committee, we're asking them for consensus before the project moves forward. And if they don't get consensus, then it needs to come back to the Planning Commission for approval. That would be what I would suggest.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused because I thought we might vote on this without the variance.
Yeah. So we're voting on this without the variance.
Okay.
There's a new project that's been submitted. The Architectural Advisory Committee looks at this and says, whoa, 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 you guys didn't think about something that's technical in nature that can't be resolved, and they don't get resolution to their satisfaction, then it needs to come back to the Planning Commission. That's my understanding of what would be a reasonable thing to do here.
Thank you, Chair Hernandez. Chair Johannes?
So I just want to clarify.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Johannes.
I'm just wanting to find out, this is substantially equivalent except for the tower, it seems like. So as Jill mentioned, the Architectural Commission would just pretty much, a committee would pretty much look at this to make sure that the elements all work together. There's no structural items that I feel or that I'm hearing need to be adjusted. And that if we were to approve this today, to go back to the Architectural Committee, we would place conditions on it, which would mean everything else in the resolution would change. Is that correct?
I think what I'm hearing is that there would be a motion to approve the resolution with several modifications. One would be that there would be no approval of a variance, and I think we would probably maybe need to modify the referral to the plans that had been submitted to refer to the plans with the exception of the covered stairway to the roof deck, and instead refer to the new diagrams that were submitted today, along with an additional condition for architectural review committee review after the approval. And then it's up to you. I heard Chair Hernandez say that he wanted the condition about architectural review committee to require that there is an essentially a consensus that, oh yes, you have your hand up.
I would just defer to satisfy city staff's perspective that this has met the conditions. I think go to architectural review, get their feedback, and then city staff, I would delegate the authority to city staff that we've met the conditions. I mean, because I think it gets a little tricky. Do we get 3 out of 3 or 2 out of 3?
Okay, that simplifies things.
Yeah.
And then I think there's already a condition in the draft resolution that allows staff to make minor changes that don't affect the findings of the commission. And so staff could utilize that. I think there's just a concern and an interest in making sure that this new proposal works structurally in addition to the design piece. Of course, there will be building plans that have to be reviewed as well. But that's what I would, that's what I'm hearing is the motion that's being discussed. And don't forget the additional condition about the landscaping.
Right. And just a point of clarification, does the commission have the authority to delegate authority to the staff, or does it come from the council?
At this point, since there's no variance involved, I don't see any problem with delegating to the Director of Community Development to deal with any issues that might come up in the Architectural Review Committee review.
And from a historical perspective, that's consistent with things we've done for the 8 years I've been on this committee or commission.
So can I make a motion?
Of course.
To approve this project with a couple of conditions, to not approve the height variance and to add on the number 6 landscaping approval with the further condition that this go to architectural review to make sure that to get their input about the new changes. How's that?
Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Just for the record, the name of that body is the Architectural Advisory Committee.
Sorry, I got us off track, I think.
Thank you for that.
Well, it's important because they don't make decisions, you know, they don't approve and disapprove.
They provide advice to us.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone wish to make any comments on that motion before we vote?
Okay.
Okay,
Here we
Bridget,
go.
I think we're ready.
Okay, Commissioner Reddick,
I will reluctantly vote yes.
Commissioner Johannes,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn,
Yes, please.
Acting Chair Gossett,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
I will also reluctantly vote yes.
Motion approved 5-0.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I should have explained that my reluctance has nothing to do with the project, just the way this process ended up working tonight. I hope it doesn't become standard operating procedures, but thank you, everyone.
Yes.
We're at the point where we're going to have a director's report, please.
We need to close this item.
Oh, I'm sorry. So do we need to make a motion to close this item? No?
No, we're good. We can, Yeah, it's
Thing that-
5:00.
yeah, there you go.
5:00.
There we go.
Public hear- okay.
Approved. We can move on to the next item.
I think we all needed that.
It's late, so we're struggling.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Gossett, Acting Chair Gossett, thank you for, staff is just in awe of how you've stepped in and handled a really unusual process tonight. So I couldn't help but notice what a
But-
great job you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I will try to be brief. Housing element, I have a couple housing updates, and I'm going to try to do this routinely because we are working so hard on housing. The housing element 30-day comment period ended last week on May 16th. We'd like to thank you all for your excellent input at the joint session and separately in your written communications that some of you provided. We've been working on the revisions, and our target date to submit to HCD is May 31st. 555 Kelly Avenue is the city-owned property just a little bit south of where we're sitting now, where we have the Mercy Housing and Alas proposed 40-unit project. They hosted a community meeting at the library last Wednesday. It was a very nice turnout, and I will hold further comments that I had about it because two of our commissioners were there, and you may have your own report out, and it was great to see you there. I thought that was very good. We are trying to bring 555 Kelly forward to the Architectural Advisory Committee on June 8th for a design review session in the library at 9 in the morning. That's a special venue for that group. That's their standard meeting time is now 9 o'clock on is that the second Tuesday of the month? Okay, Thursday. Oh my goodness. Thank you. So we'll give you more information as that firms up, and that will be very broadly noticed. We will make sure that goes out in e-news and is posted on the city's website. The plans that we expect the applicant to present are the same as those that were presented in the community meeting. So that will give this applicant and staff who are reviewing this a really good sense of this preliminary application. It's an early application. Agenda forecast for the Planning Commission, your June 13th meeting, our city engineer will be bringing the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 23-24 for your consideration of general plan conformance. That's something you do every year. It's actually always a really interesting item, and it gives you a great insight into public works oriented projects, streets, parks, and the like. So we're looking forward to that. I believe also that, is Doug bringing the East Side? We're trying to bring the East Side Parallel Trail segment. It's a northern segment of that trail to you for that meeting as well. The June 27th agenda is firming up. I do need to share, we're speaking of firming up, we need to firm up the Planning Commission's schedule this summer. The Hyatt project final environmental impact report is nearing completion. It will be circulated and then brought to a hearing with the project before you. To that end, I'm getting a bit concerned about making sure that we have a full commission in attendance for a hearing within the next month or so. We see absences for both July meetings, and we may need to proceed despite that, but we do try for big projects to have a full commission. Outside this meeting and email, Bridget's going to reach out to you again to confirm absences that we're already aware of, and then to hone in on the August 8th meeting. It looks like we could have full attendance that day, and so the sooner we know that, the better. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but this is something that really has to have a lot of logistics to get the noticing. There's so many rules when CEQA comes in, so appreciate your consideration of that. City Council, their June 6th meeting, they'll have the first reading of the short-term vacation rental and home occupation ordinance for readoption following the Coastal Commission certification. Another thing they do every year, they're going to update the master fee schedule. That's something that's done according to various indexes. I just note it because we were asked about costs of permit tonight, so just to let you know a little bit about that process. On their June 20th meeting, we're hoping the short-term rental ordinance would be ready for a second reading, but we'll find out. Council will be looking at their budget, and I'll be bringing the contracts for services that we continue to have annually for building support and planning support. And I think I sent you, again, a last call on a training session over the hill. I think our acting chair Gossett will be there. I'm going to try to attend. It will be great, Commissioner Joannis too. It's going to be at the library in City of San Mateo. Usually these are really nice sessions. You'll meet a lot of other planning commissioners, staff from other cities, and they usually serve a reasonably nice dinner as well. So I'll see you there. And that is my report.
Chair Hernandez?
Chair?
Yes.
As much as I love planning projects, August 8th, I'm going to be somewhere between Costa Rica and South Texas on a plane. So I can't make that meeting. The following, the fourth Tuesday works for me, but I am unavailable on August 8th.
Thank you.
So I apologize for jumping back in. Thank you for sharing that already, Chair Hernandez. We're going to check and see if it's okay to take a project with a full EIR on a special meeting date in the event that that might work for you. The City Council does not meet their first meeting of August, so I think that would be August 1st. I know that is not on any of your calendars for Planning Commission, but we'll send you an email about that once we confirm that that is an appropriate process.
Thank you for that. Do any commissioners have any reports? I would like to make one. I last month toured the SAM plant, our wastewater treatment plant, with the general manager, Keishan, and I was wondering if it might be possible for city staff to maybe look at some of their PSAs that they have to remind people not to flush fats, oils, and grease down the drain, because it's really hard on their infrastructure. And when I toured the plant, I was shocked at the amount of plastic and flushable wipes that they were pulling out of the first filter that is used to pull out the big solids before they start treating the wastewater. So a lot of plastic is being flushed down the drain, along with the flushable wipes that aren't really supposed to be put down into our sewer system. So I don't know if there's a possibility. I know they've had a few PSAs out, public service announcements, but it might be helpful because a lot of this stuff is then landfilled. It's going to be landfilled anyway, but we pay for it anyway with our garbage bill, and then they're paying for it additionally to take stuff that shouldn't be put into the sewer system. So they're doing a great job over there to try and keep the plant running. They've had some innovative technology that they use to determine if the plant is operating at an optimal level at which they like. So they are very willing to give tours to anyone in the public. That's it.
Speaking of landfills, the landfill at the end of in Seymour. It looks like there's some kind of erosion going on there, and there are a lot of exposed buried bags. And I first thought it was sandcrete that was supporting the sides of the ditch, but it looks like it's actually garbage bags with straws outside. So, and it looks like it's at the surface of the landfill, so I thought there would have been a cap on that landfill. I don't think it's a Subtitle D landfill, but I just feel that there's something going on there that I don't know if anybody's looking into that, but it should be checked out because it's exposing stuff.
Thank you for that. We will refer that comment to our county colleagues. There are staff members there that are keeping an eye on it, but because you're here and you see it regularly, it's very helpful to us when you report these things.
Chair Hernandez?
So first of all, wow, take a look at that, please. But the steps to Poplar Beach after the recent storms have eroded significantly. And so you can see gaps between the wood beams that establish the steps and the sand and soil that fills those gaps. And so it's starting to become treacherous as you descend the engineered steps that have been put there. So I haven't seen any significant changes in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And so I would encourage, if city staff's not already working on this, I would encourage folks to go take a quick look at that and see what needs to happen to fill in some of the gaps or keep the erosion from accelerating there.
And one more comment, since we were talking about Seymour Ditch. I think at the last city council meeting, or maybe a couple of meetings back, they talked about doing a methane study in Half Moon Bay. And I didn't know if Seymour Ditch was going to be included in that study. They didn't mention it, and I'm pretty sure methane is being emitted from that ditch. I'm sorry, not ditch, landfill.
Thank you.
There's a ditch and a
Okay.
landfill. I think you knew what I was talking about.
We'll check
little
in with
late.
our city engineer on all 3 items and as well as San Mateo County. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So should we take a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion from the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Thank you for
to
that.
Convene.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Yes. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.